All right, folks, this is Mr. Ryan. We're going to continue with statistics. You probably just finished learning about the normal distribution and how to identify proportions of populations, how to determine what proportion of a population is larger than a number and what proportion is smaller than a number, or what proportion of a population is between numbers using a sample. Okay, so I want to briefly review what is the difference between a population and a sample. Okay, well, when we're talking about a group of things, okay, a population is all of them. A sample is some of them. Now, some of them can be one less than all of them. So let's say that you have a population of deer. Let's say that there's 120 deer in one particular area. And you're able to investigate or measure something about these deer, but you can't measure all 120 of them. You're only able to measure 119 of them. Okay? What you have, that measure, whatever you measured, let's say you measured the length of the deer or the size of their head or something like that. What you have, if you were only able to measure 119 of them out of 120, you have a sample. You do not have the population. Now, if you were able to measure all 120 of them, you would have the population. Okay, so a sample is some of them, and a population is all of them. Now, some of the things that you have probably learned how to do with data, with a bunch of numbers, a big group of numbers. Let's say that you have 73 numbers that all measure something like the heights of students or the weights of dogs or something like that. One of the things that you can identify about that data is the mean, the average, right? You added up all the numbers and divided by how many there were. That is called the mean, the arithmetic mean, okay? You can also identify the standard deviation. The standard deviation. And if you have used the z-table to identify proportions, then you probably have used, well, you will have had to use the mean and the standard deviation. And then related to the standard deviation is the variance. Now, very simply, we understand the variance as the standard deviation squared, or we understand the standard deviation as the square root of the variance. Now, we use different symbols to represent population characteristics and sample characteristics. So, if the mean that you have is the mean of the population, we use the Greek letter mu. That is the Greek letter mu. It looks like a weird looking cursive U, okay? But that is the lowercase, I think it's lowercase, Greek letter mu. If it's the population standard deviation, if the standard deviation you have is the standard deviation of the population, the entire population, then we call that sigma, lowercase sigma, also a Greek letter. And then if it's the variance that you have of the population, that's sigma squared, okay? So the population mean is mu, the population standard deviation is sigma, and the population variance is sigma squared. Now, if the mean that you have is the mean of a bunch of numbers that's just a sample of the population, then what you have is x bar. Okay, we're using Latin letters. Now we put a bar over it, and that bar means the average of that variable. Okay? If the standard deviation is what you have of a sample, then that's just S. And then if it's the variance, if it's a sample that you have and you have a variance, that's S squared. Okay? Now, the last thing I want to say is that these qualities, the mean, the standard deviation, and the variance, these are defining qualities of either the population or they are defining qualities of the sample. When we're talking about defining qualities of a population, they are called parameters. They're called parameters. So these are population parameters. When we're talking about defining characteristics of only a sample of the population, we call those statistics. Statistics. And the class that you're in right now is called statistics, which means that the purpose of the class that you are in, the primary focus of that class, is to understand how to use defining qualities from a sample to draw conclusions about a population. Okay? That's typically what we learn in a statistics class. So it's important for you to understand that when we say statistics, we're talking about defining qualities of a sample and how to use those qualities, the sample mean, the sample standard deviation, the sample variance, and other sample qualities, to be able to draw conclusions about a population that we're trying to understand. Okay? So keep that in mind while you're learning these things that we're learning. Okay?